The alarm bells echoed through the massive halls of Nexus Prime. The sound had been going on for 3 days now, and everyone knew what it meant. Death was coming to the galaxy, and no one knew how to stop it. Ambassador Zeethkar stood at the center of the great council chamber. His crystal body flickered with nervous light as he looked at the thousands of alien faces staring back at him. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy had come here. Some flew in ships that moved faster than light. Others had traveled through space gates that bent reality itself. All of them had come for the same reason. The Zerathi swarm was destroying everything. 12 star systems are gone, Zeethkar said. His voice carried through the chamber without any speaker system. The Altarians were one of the oldest races in the galaxy, and they had learned to speak directly to the mind. The Kepler colonies, the mining worlds of Vega, even the fortress planets of the Rigel defense line, all consumed. A low murmur ran through the crowd. Fear had a smell in this place. It was the mixture of 1,000 different species, all feeling the same emotion. The Zerathi swarm did not negotiate. It did not take prisoners. It simply ate everything and turned it into more of itself. Admiral Vel-Tar of the Centaurian fleet stood up. His blue skin was darker than usual, which meant he was angry. Our quantum weapons did nothing. The swarm adapted to every energy signature we fired at it. Plasma cannons, photon torpedoes, antimatter bombs. Nothing worked. The same happened to us, added General Crix from the Andromedan Defense Corps. His forearms gestured wildly as he spoke. We threw everything we had at them. The swarm just absorbed our attacks and grew stronger. Our best scientists say it learns from whatever tries to destroy it. Commander Jake Morrison sat quietly in the human section. He was the only person from Earth in the chamber, and most of the aliens pretended he was not there. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only made contact 5 years ago, and most species still thought of them as primitive savages from a death world. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. That meant it was so dangerous that most galactic species would die within minutes of landing there. The air was toxic. The water was full of deadly chemicals. The weather could kill you in a dozen different ways. And the life forms that lived there were all designed to hunt and kill each other. Most aliens could not understand how anything intelligent had evolved on such a horrible planet. They looked at humans and saw barbarians who somehow learned to build spaceships. What about the energy barriers? Asked Chancellor Morden from the Epsilon Collective. Surely we can create a defensive perimeter around our core worlds. Zeethkar's crystal form dimmed. We tried that at Beta Centauri. The swarm simply flowed around the barriers like water. It found every weakness, every gap. The planet was consumed. In 6 hours, the chamber fell silent. Beta Centauri had been one of the most heavily defended worlds in the galaxy. If it could fall so quickly, nowhere was safe. Dr. Lisa Grant sat next to Commander Morrison in the human section. She was Earth's chief expert on alien biology, and she had been studying the reports about the Zerathi swarm for weeks. Unlike the other species in the chamber, she was not afraid. She was fascinated. The swarm was unlike anything in the galaxy's known biology. It was part machine and part living organism. It could adapt to any environment and any weapon. It reproduced by consuming matter and energy, turning everything it touched into more of itself. In many ways, it was perfect, but Lisa had spent her life studying life forms from Earth. She knew that nothing was truly perfect. Everything had a weakness. The question was finding it. Perhaps we should evacuate the core worlds, suggested Ambassador Thyses from the Serpentine Republic. Her snake-like body coiled nervously as she spoke. Move our populations to the outer rim territories. And then what? Admiral Vel-Tar snapped. Wait for the swarm to eat the entire galaxy? There are trillions of beings out there. We cannot. Just abandon them. The argument that followed was typical of Galactic Council meetings. Everyone had opinions, but no one had solutions. The more advanced species looked down on the less advanced ones. The military leaders wanted to fight. The civilian leaders wanted to run. And through it all, the Zirathi swarm kept growing. Commander Morrison finally stood up. The chamber gradually fell quiet as the other species noticed the human trying to speak. Most of them had never heard a human talk before. "My people would like to help," Jake said. His voice was calm and steady, even though he knew most of the aliens in the room thought he was wasting their time. A few species laughed. The sound was not pleasant when it came from beings with multiple throats or no throats at all. Help? Chancellor Mordoon's tentacles waved in what his species used for amusement. "No offense, human, but your people barely have faster-than-light travel. What could you possibly do that our advanced civilizations cannot?" Dr. Grant stood up next to Jake. She had been waiting for this moment. "We would like to examine the biological samples you have collected from swarm encounters." Biological samples? Zethkar's crystal form flickered with confusion. "The swarm is not biological. It is a hybrid biomechanical construct. Our greatest scientists have studied it for months." "That's exactly why we want to look at it," Lisa said. "Your scientists are experts on galactic biology. But Earth biology is different. Very different." Admiral Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Different? You mean primitive?" "I mean adapted," Lisa replied. "Every life form on Earth has spent billions of years learning to survive in conditions that would kill most species in this room. We have organisms that eat metal, bacteria that thrive in acid, viruses that adapt faster than any computer, and fungi that can consume almost anything organic." The chamber was quiet now. Most of the aliens were not sure what to make of this strange human female who spoke so calmly about horrible things. "You're talking about biological warfare," General Crick said. His 4 arms crossed over his chest. "That is forbidden by galactic law." "Your laws are going to matter a lot when the swarm eats your homeworld," Jake said. There was no anger in his voice, just fact. Zethkar's crystal form pulsed with light as he considered this. The Altarians were a peaceful species, but they were also practical. "What exactly are you proposing?" Dr. Grant smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We're proposing to fight biology with biology. The swarm thinks it's the perfect hybrid organism, but it's never encountered life forms from a death world. It has no experience with organisms that evolved in constant warfare against each other." "This is madness," Chancellor Mordoon said. "You want to unleash death-world organisms against the swarm. What if they spread? What if they mutate? You could destroy the galaxy faster than the Zirathi." "Maybe," Lisa admitted. "But at least it would be our choice. Right now, we're just waiting to die." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported the human proposal. Others were horrified by it. A few suggested that the humans were just as dangerous as the swarm, but in the end, it came down to mathematics. The Zirathi swarm was growing exponentially. At current rates, it would consume the entire galaxy within 2 years. Every conventional weapon had failed. Every defense had been broken. They had nothing left to lose. Zethkar called for a vote. It was close, but desperation won over caution. The Galactic Council would allow the humans to try their Death World solution. As the session ended and the various species began to file out, Admiral Veltar approached the human section. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said to Commander Morrison. Jake looked at the blue-skinned alien commander. "We're from Earth," he said simply. "We never know what we're doing. We just try to survive." Dr. Grant was already packing her equipment. She had work to do. Somewhere in Earth's vast biological arsenal was the weapon that could save the galaxy. She just had to find it before the swarm found them. The emergency session in the White House Situation Room had been going on for 6 hours. President Helen Rodriguez sat at the head of the long table, looking at the faces of the most powerful people on Earth. Military leaders, scientists, and politicians all stared at the holographic display showing the Zirathi swarm's advance across the galaxy. "So let me understand this correctly," the president said. "The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy have failed to stop this thing. And now they want us to save them with germs and bacteria." General Paul Martinez nodded grimly. "That's about the size of it, Madam President." Commander Morrison sent the full report from the Galactic Council. "Every energy weapon they have just makes the swarm stronger. But Dr. Grant thinks our biological weapons might work." Dr. Amy Walsh from the Centers for Disease Control leaned forward. "It's not just germs, General. We're talking about weaponizing Earth's entire ecosystem. Every virus, bacteria, fungus, and parasite that has evolved on this planet. The swarm has never encountered anything like what we have here." Secretary of Defense Robert Chun looked skeptical. "These aliens have technology we can barely understand. They travel faster than light. They have weapons that can destroy planets. And you're telling me that Earth bacteria can do what their superweapons cannot?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Dr. Walsh replied. "The swarm adapts to energy-based attacks because that's what it expects. That's what every advanced civilization uses. But biological warfare? That's something completely different." Admiral Steve Warren, the head of Earth's small space fleet, studied the tactical reports. "The alien fleets are getting destroyed faster than they can build new ships. We have maybe 20 vessels that can reach the combat zone, against a swarm that has consumed 12 star systems. Numbers don't matter if we're using the right weapon," General Martinez said. "One sick person can infect thousands. One spore can destroy an entire forest. That's how biological warfare works." President Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the busy streets of Washington, D.C. People were going about their daily lives, not knowing that the fate of the galaxy might depend on them. "What are the risks? If we do this, what's the worst that could happen?" Dr. Walsh was quiet for a moment. "We could accidentally create something that destroys all life in the galaxy, including us. Some of the organisms we're talking about using are incredibly dangerous. We've kept them contained in laboratories because they're too deadly to exist in the wild." "And if we don't do anything?" the president asked. "The swarm reaches Earth in about 18 months, Admiral Warren answered. "And then everyone dies anyway." The room fell silent. Outside, car horns honked and people laughed. Normal life continued while the leaders of humanity faced an impossible choice. "I need to know what we're actually talking about here, President," Rodriguez said. "What exactly are you planning to use?" Dr. Walsh opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "We've identified several categories of Earth organisms that might be effective. First, we have metal-eating bacteria. They're naturally occurring, and they consume iron, steel, and other metals. The swarm uses metallic components in its biomechanical structure." "Go on," the president said. "Second, we have aggressive fungal spores. There are species of fungi on Earth that can consume almost any organic material. They reproduce incredibly fast, and they're very hard to kill. Third, we have parasitic organisms that disrupt biological systems. And finally, we have viruses that adapt and mutate faster than any known computer system." General Martinez whistled softly. "That's a hell of an arsenal." "The beauty of it is that these organisms evolved naturally," Dr. Walsh continued. "They didn't evolve to fight one specific enemy. They evolved to survive in the most hostile environment in the known galaxy, Earth." Secretary Chun still looked doubtful. "How do we deploy these weapons?" "We can't just throw petri dishes at the swarm. "We're working on that," Admiral Warren said. "We'll need specially designed delivery systems. Missiles that can penetrate the swarm's defenses and release the biological agents. Ships that can get close enough to deploy spore clouds. And people brave enough to fly those ships." "People?" President Rodriguez asked. "Volunteers," General Martinez explained. "This is essentially a suicide mission. Anyone who gets close enough to the swarm to deploy these weapons probably isn't coming back." The president sat back down. "How many volunteers would we need?" "Thousands." Admiral Warren said quietly. "Maybe tens of thousands. We'll need crews for the ships, scientists to monitor the biological weapons, soldiers to protect the deployment teams. And most of them will die." President Rodriguez closed her eyes. She had sent people to war before, but never like this. Never. Knowing that most of them would not return. "There's something else," Dr. Walsh said. "The aliens are terrified of what we're posing. Some of them think we're as dangerous as the swarm. They're only agreeing to this because they're desperate." "Are they right to be afraid?" The president asked. Dr. Walsh was honest. "Yes. What we're planning to do goes against every rule of civilized warfare. We're going to unleash the most dangerous life forms on Earth against an enemy that has never encountered anything like them. It could work perfectly. Or it could spiral out of control and destroy everything." General Martinez leaned back in his chair. "So we're damned if we do and damned if we don't." "Pretty much," Dr. Walsh agreed. The president stood up again. "I need to address the nation and the world. People have a right to know what we're planning." 3 hours later, President Rodriguez stood at the podium in the Oval Office. Cameras from around the world focused on her as she prepared to give the most important speech in human history. "My fellow Americans and citizens of the world," she began, "I speak to you tonight about a threat unlike any humanity has ever faced. Not a threat to our nation, or even our planet, but to all life in the galaxy." She explained about the Zirathi swarm, about the alien civilizations that were being destroyed, and about the desperate request for help from the Galactic Council. "The advanced species of the galaxy have asked us to do something they cannot do themselves," she continued. "They have asked us to fight with weapons they consider primitive and dangerous. They have asked us to use the very nature of our world against this enemy." The president paused, looking directly into the camera. "Earth is what the galaxy calls a death world. They think our planet is too dangerous for intelligent life. They think we are barbarians who somehow learned to build spaceships. They may be right." She took a deep breath. "But sometimes barbarians are exactly what you need. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the most primitive weapon. And sometimes those who live in hell are the only ones who can fight the devil." The speech continued for 20 minutes. President Rodriguez explained that volunteers would be needed, that the mission was dangerous, and that most people who went would not return. She was honest about the risks and the slim chances of success. When she finished, the world was quiet for exactly 30 seconds. Then the phone calls began. Within 6 hours, over 2 million people had volunteered. Veterans, scientists, teachers, farmers, students. People from every walk of life wanted to help save a galaxy that barely knew they existed. Captain Ryan Collins was one of the first to volunteer. He was a Marine who had served in 3 wars and had been planning to retire. When he heard the president's speech, he drove to the nearest recruitment center and signed up immediately. "Why are you doing this?" the recruiting officer asked him. Ryan thought about it for a moment. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "And because I'm from Earth. Fighting impossible battles is what we do." Dr. Karen Foster also volunteered. She was a microbiologist who specialized in extreme organisms. She had spent her career studying life forms that lived in places where nothing should be able to survive. Now she would have the chance to weaponize that knowledge. Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker was already in the Navy when the call came. He had commanded submarines in the deepest parts of Earth's oceans. He understood how to fight in hostile environments, where one mistake meant death. Within 2 weeks, Earth's greatest minds were working around the clock to prepare for war. Factories that had been making cars and computers began producing biological warfare equipment. Laboratories that had been researching cures for diseases began developing the most dangerous weapons ever created. The Hughes Defiant was the first ship to be completed. Admiral Warren would command the mission from this vessel. It was not the largest ship in Earth's fleet, but it was designed specifically for this mission. Its cargo holds were filled with the most dangerous life forms on Earth. As the fleet prepared to depart, Dr. Walsh made one final check of their biological arsenal. Containers of metal-eating bacteria sat next to samples of aggressive fungi. Viral cultures that could adapt to any environment were stored alongside parasitic organisms that could disrupt any biological system. "Are you sure about this, Admiral?" Warren asked her. Dr. Walsh looked at the man who would be leading humanity's most desperate mission. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm sure about what happens if we don't try." The Earth fleet launched on a Tuesday morning. 23 ships, carrying 10,000 volunteers, departed from orbital stations around Earth. The Hughes Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Rigel system, and Admiral Steve Warren immediately understood why the aliens were losing the war. Through the main view screen, he could see the Zirathi swarm in action for the first time. It was nothing like the reports had described. The swarm moved like liquid metal across space, flowing around the burning remains of what had once been a thriving star system. Massive biomechanical constructs the size of cities consumed the wreckage of alien warships, growing larger with each meal. Smaller swarm units darted between the larger forms like schools of deadly fish, adapting and changing shape as they moved. "Sweet Jesus," Captain Ryan Collins whispered. He stood on the bridge next to Admiral Warren, watching the destruction through binoculars. "How many of those things are there?" "Sensors are picking up over 50,000 individual units," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the tactical station. "And they're all connected somehow. They move like a single organism." Dr. Karen Foster was studying her instruments with fascination rather than fear. "Look at how they adapt," she said excitedly. "Every time one of the alien ships fires at them, they change. Their hull composition shifts. Their energy signatures alter. They're learning in real time." Admiral Warren activated the communications system. "This is Admiral Warren of the Earth Fleet to Admiral Voltar of the Centaurian Defense Force. Do you copy?" The reply came through filled with static and desperation. "Admiral Warren, thank the stars you are here. We've been holding the perimeter around Rigel Prime for 6 days. We've lost 60% of our fleet. The swarm keeps adapting to everything we throw at it." Through the view screen, Warren could see the alien fleet. What remained of it? Centaurian. Ships were sleek blue vessels that moved like dancers through space. But now they looked battered and desperate, firing energy weapons that seemed to have little effect on the swarm. "We're moving to assist," Warren told the alien commander. "But we need you to pull back your ships. What we're about to do might be dangerous to your crews." There was a pause. "Admiral, with respect, what can your primitive weapons do that our advanced technology cannot?" Warren smiled grimly. "You're about to find out. All Earth ships, this is Admiral Warren. Execute Operation Pandora. Release the hounds." Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker was aboard the UES Intrepid, one of the smaller ships in the Earth Fleet. His vessel was designed for close-range deployment, which meant getting as near to the swarm as possible. His crew of 30 volunteers knew they probably would not survive the mission. "Biological weapons armed and ready," reported Sergeant Lisa Thompson from the weapons bay. "Metal-eating bacteria loaded in missiles 1 through 10. Fungal spores in missiles 11 through 20. Range to target?" Parker asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing," his navigator replied. "The swarm has noticed us. Multiple units moving to intercept." Parker watched as dozens of swarm units flowed toward his small ship. They moved with purpose, already adapting their forms to counter what they expected to be another energy-based attack. "Fire," Parker ordered. The missiles launched from the Earth ship and streaked toward the swarm. But instead of the explosive warheads the aliens used, these missiles contained something the swarm had never encountered. As they impacted the biomechanical constructs, they released clouds of microscopic Earth organisms into the swarm structure. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The swarm units that were hit began to malfunction. Their metallic components started to dissolve as metal-eating bacteria consumed them from within. Fungal spores spread across their biomechanical surfaces, growing at an incredible rate and disrupting their systems. "Direct hits on 12 targets," Sergeant Thompson reported. With excitement, "The bacteria are working. Look at those readings." Parker stared at his instruments in amazement. The swarm units were trying to adapt, but they could not figure out what was attacking them. Their systems were designed to counter energy weapons and physical projectiles. They had no defense against microscopic life forms that were actively eating them. "The swarm is confused," reported Dr. Foster from the UES Defiant. "Their adaptation protocols are failing. They've never encountered biological warfare before." Admiral Warren watched as more Earth ships engaged the swarm with their biological weapons. The results were better than anyone had dared hope. Swarm units were dissolving, malfunctioning, and dying as Earth's microscopic warriors did what plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes could not. But the swarm was learning. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kim called out with alarm, "the swarm is adapting. The units that haven't been hit are modifying their structure. They're developing biological defenses." Warren cursed under his breath. He had expected this. The swarm's ability to adapt was what made it so dangerous. They had maybe minutes before it figured out how to counter their biological weapons. "All ships, this is Admiral Warren. Execute Phase 2. Deploy the aggressive strains." Dr. Foster's hands moved quickly over her control panel. "Releasing the enhanced organisms," she announced. "These are the ones we've been keeping in maximum containment back on Earth." The second wave of biological weapons was different from the first. These were organisms that Earth scientists had been afraid to study too closely. Viruses that mutated faster than computers could track them. Bacteria that consumed any organic material they encountered. Fungi that spread through any environment and could not be killed by conventional means. Captain Collins was aboard the UES Wolverine, leading a squadron of attack ships directly into the heart of the swarm. His mission was to deploy the most dangerous biological agents as close to the swarm's core as possible. "We're taking heavy fire," his pilot reported, as swarm units attacked their ship with energy beams and physical projectiles. "Hull integrity at 60%. Keep us steady," Collins ordered. "We need to get these spores into their main mass." The Wolverine shook as more swarm weapons hit it. Collins could see the biomechanical monsters through his cockpit window, flowing around his ship like living metal. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, constantly changing and adapting as they tried to destroy the human vessel. "Spore deployment ready," announced Dr. Janet Murphy from the weapons bay. She was a fungal specialist who had volunteered for this mission knowing she would probably die. "These organisms will spread through any biological system they encounter." "Do it," Collins said. The spores released from the Earthship in the invisible cloud. Unlike the previous biological weapons, These ones were designed to spread. Each spore that found a target would produce thousands more spores, which would find new targets and produce even more. The effect rippled through the swarm like a virus through a crowded city. Biomechanical units began to malfunction as the aggressive fungi consumed their biological components. The swarm's adaptation protocols went into overdrive, but the organisms from Earth were changing faster than the swarm could counter them. "It's working," Dr. Foster reported from the Defiant. "The swarm's trying to isolate infected units, but the spores are spreading too fast." Admiral Veltar's voice came through the communication system, filled with amazement and horror. "Admiral Warren, what have you done? The swarm is ... it's dying. But those organisms you've released, they're spreading to everything. Even our ships are showing contamination." Warren had expected this too. All Centaurian vessels maintain distance from the combat zone. These organisms are designed to consume biomechanical systems. Your ships have biological components. Through the view screen, Warren could see the alien fleet pulling back as the Earth organisms spread through the swarm. The Centaurian ships were beautiful, but they used living technology that was vulnerable to Earth's biological weapons. Battle continued for 6 hours. Wave after wave of Earth ships deployed their biological arsenal against the swarm. Metal-eating bacteria dissolved the swarm's infrastructure. Aggressive fungi consumed their biological systems. Parasitic organisms disrupted their communications networks, but the swarm was vast, and it was learning. "Admiral," Dr. Foster said with concern, "the swarm is developing countermeasures. The newer units are showing resistance to our organisms. They're adapting faster than we expected." Warren studied the tactical display. They had destroyed maybe 10% of the swarm in the Rigel system, but the remaining units were becoming harder to kill. The biological weapons that had been devastatingly effective at first were now only marginally useful. "How long before they're completely immune?" Warren asked. "At current adaptation rates, maybe 12 hours, Dr. Foster replied. "After that, our biological weapons will be useless." Warren made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All ships prepare for Phase 3. We're deploying the Pandora organisms. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what Phase 3 meant. The Pandora organisms were the most dangerous life forms ever discovered on Earth. They had been kept in isolated laboratories because they were too deadly to study safely. Using them was a desperate gamble that could save the galaxy or destroy it. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, "the Pandora organisms could spread beyond the swarm. They could infect everything in the galaxy." "I know," Warren replied, "but if we don't stop the swarm here, there won't be a galaxy left to save." Captain Collins received the order aboard the Wolverine. The Pandora organisms spread through space like invisible death. Dr. Karen Foster watched her instruments with a mixture of fascination and terror as the most dangerous life forms from Earth encountered the Zirathi swarm for the first time. "What exactly are we looking at?" Admiral Steve Warren asked as he studied the readings on his command screen. "Hell," Dr. Foster replied simply. "We're looking at what happens when Earth's deepest nightmares meet an alien invasion. The Pandora organisms were not like the bacteria and fungi they had used before. These creatures came from the deepest parts of Earth's oceans, from volcanic vents where the pressure could crush submarines and the heat could melt steel. They had evolved in conditions so extreme that most scientists believed nothing could survive there. They were wrong. "The organisms are making contact with swarm units," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the tactical station. "I'm seeing massive energy fluctuations across the entire swarm network." To the main view screen, the crew of the U.S. Defiant watched something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The Zirathi swarm, which had seemed invincible just hours ago, began to change. But this was not the controlled adaptation they had shown before. This was something else entirely. Swarm units started to convulse and twist as the Pandora organisms infected them. The biomechanical constructs that had flowed through space like liquid metal now writhed in apparent agony. Some units began to attack each other, their coordination breaking down as the Earth organisms disrupted their network connections. "The swarm's command structure is collapsing," Dr. Foster said with amazement. "The Pandora organisms aren't just killing individual units. They're destroying the entire network that holds the swarm together." Captain Ryan Collins was still aboard the damaged U.S. Wolverine, watching the battle from close range. His ship was barely holding together, but he had a front-row seat to the most important fight in galactic history. "Dr. Murphy," he called to the fungal specialist, "what exactly did we just release?" Dr. Janet Murphy looked up from her instruments with tired eyes. She had been working non-stop for 18 hours, managing the biological weapons deployment. "Organisms that shouldn't exist," she said. "Life forms that evolution should have killed off millions of years ago. But somehow they survived in the deepest parts of our oceans." "And now they're loose in space," Collins said. "Now they're loose in space," she agreed. The effect on the swarm was devastating. Units that had been functioning perfectly began to malfunction in ways that made no sense. Some started consuming each other. Others simply stopped moving and began to dissolve. The careful coordination that had made the swarm so dangerous fell apart as the Pandora organisms spread through their far network. But the most terrifying part was what happened next. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kim said with growing alarm, "the infected swarm units aren't dying. They're changing." Warren leaned forward in his command chair. "Changing how?" "They're becoming something else. Something that's not quite swarm and not quite the Pandora organisms. Something new." Dr. Foster was studying the readings with growing excitement and horror. "The organisms aren't just destroying the swarm," she said. "They're incorporating it, taking its technology and biology and merging it with their own structure. Is that good or bad?" Warren asked. "I honestly don't know," Dr. Foster admitted. "We're in completely uncharted territory here." Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker was aboard the U.S. Intrepid, leading a squadron of Earth ships deeper into the swarm formation. His mission was to deploy additional Pandora organisms at the swarm's core, but what he found there made him stop in shock. "Command, this is Parker," he reported over the communication system. "You need to see this." The tactical display showed what Parker's sensors were detecting. At the center of the swarm formation was a massive biomechanical construct the size of a small moon. It was the swarm's primary hub, the central intelligence that coordinated all the other units, and it was infected. The Pandora organisms had reached the hub and were spreading through its structure like wildfire. But instead of destroying it, they were transforming it. The hub was growing, changing, becoming something that was neither fully swarm nor fully Earth organism. "What are we looking at?" Admiral Warren asked over the communication channel. "Evolution," Dr. Foster whispered. "We're watching evolution in real time. The Pandora organisms are using the swarm's technology to enhance themselves." Marine Sergeant Tony Blake was aboard the U.S. Gladiator with a team of volunteers preparing for what everyone assumed would be the final assault. Their mission was to penetrate the swarm hub and deploy the last of Earth's biological weapons directly into its core. "You understand this is a one-way trip," Blake told his team as they checked their equipment. The men and women with him were all volunteers who had known from the beginning that they probably would not survive this mission. Corporal Maria Santos nodded grimly. "We understood that when we signed up, Sergeant. The question is whether we can get close enough to make a difference." Private First Class Danny Wright was the youngest member of the team at 19 years old. He had lied about his age to join the mission, but no one had bothered to check his records. What happens if those organisms spread beyond the swarm? He asked. Blake was honest with his team. Then we might have just doomed the galaxy instead of saving it. The assault shuttles launched from the Earthships and headed directly toward the swarm hub. They were small, fast vessels designed to penetrate enemy defenses and deliver their cargo before being destroyed. The pilots knew they were flying suicide missions. "Incoming fire," reported the pilot of Blake's shuttle. "Swarm units are targeting us." Through the cockpit window, Blake could see swarm fighters moving to intercept them. But these units were different from the ones they had encountered before. They moved erratically, as if they were fighting against their own programming. Some attacked the Earth shuttles. Others attacked each other. "The Pandora organisms are spreading through their network," observed Dr. Foster from the Defiant. "The swarm can't coordinate its defenses properly." Blake's shuttle made it through the defensive perimeter and approached the massive hub. Up close, it was even more terrifying than it had appeared on the sensors. The structure was constantly changing, growing new appendages, and then dissolving them again. Parts of it looked like swarm technology. Other parts looked like something else entirely. "Deploying landing team," the pilot announced. "Good luck, Marines." Blake and his team jumped from the shuttle in their spacesuits and used magnetic boots to attach themselves to the hub's surface. The structure felt alive under their feet, pulsing with energy and movement. "Where do we plant the charges?" Corporal Santos asked. Blake looked around at the alien landscape. They were standing on something that was part machine, part organism, and part something else that had no name. "Anywhere," he said. "This whole thing needs to die." They moved across the hub's surface, planting biological charges that would release the last of Earth's Pandora organisms directly into the structure's core. Each charge contained enough dangerous life forms to sterilize a planet. "Charges set." Wright reported. "Timer is running." Blake looked up at the stars, knowing he would never see Earth again. "This is for everyone back home," he said into his radio, "and for everyone in the galaxy who deserves a chance to live." The charges detonated simultaneously, releasing billions of Pandora organisms into the hub's core systems. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The massive structure began to convulse and change, its biomechanical systems failing as the Earth organisms consumed it from within. But something unexpected happened. Instead of simply dying, the hub began to broadcast a signal across the entire swarm network. Every infected unit in the galaxy received the same message at the same time. "What's happening?" Admiral Warren demanded. Dr. Foster was staring at her. "Instruments with shock. The hub is sending out some kind of biological command. It's telling every swarm unit to self-destruct." Across the galaxy, the Zerathi swarm began to die. Units that had been consuming star systems for months suddenly stopped functioning. The massive biomechanical constructs that had seemed invincible simply shut down and began to dissolve. The war was over, but the victory had come at a terrible price. "The Pandora organisms are still spreading," Dr. Foster reported with growing concern. "They're not stopping with the swarm. They're adapting to space environments and looking for new targets." Admiral Warren realized what this meant. They had stopped the swarm, but they might have created something even worse. The Pandora organisms were loose in the galaxy, and no one knew how to control them. "All ships, this is Admiral Warren," he announced over the fleet communications. "Phase 4 is authorized. Deploy the containment protocols." The final phase of Operation Pandora was something they had hoped never to use. Earth scientists had developed a biological kill switch for the Pandora organisms, but using it would require sacrificing the remaining Earth ships to deliver it. The battle to save the galaxy was ending, but the battle to survive what they had unleashed was just beginning. The containment protocol was humanity's last desperate gamble. Dr. Karen Foster worked frantically in the laboratory aboard the UES. Defiant as Admiral Steve Warren coordinated the final phase of Operation Pandora. Around them, the Zirathi swarm was dying, but the Pandora organisms were spreading unchecked through the galaxy. "How long do we have?" Warren asked as he watched the tactical display. Red dots representing Pandora infections were appearing on star systems across the galaxy. "Maybe 6 hours before the organisms reach inhabited worlds," Dr. Foster replied without looking up from her work. "The kill switch is almost ready, but we need to deploy it from multiple points simultaneously. The organisms are too widespread. Now for a single deployment." Lieutenant Sarah Kim looked up from her station with grim news. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from the Centaurian fleet. Their bioships are showing signs of Pandora infection. Admiral Veltar is requesting immediate assistance." Warren activated the communication system. "Admiral Veltar, this is Warren. What's your situation?" The alien commander's voice came through filled with panic. "The organisms you released are consuming my ships from the inside. My crews are evacuating to emergency pods, but we don't know if that will be enough." "What have you done to us?" "We saved you from the swarm," Warren replied honestly. "Now we need to save everyone from what? We used to do it." Captain Ryan Collins was aboard one of the few remaining Earthships, the UES Ranger. His original vessel, the Wolverine, had been destroyed in the battle against the swarm hub. Now he commanded a skeleton crew of survivors as they prepared for the final mission. "All remaining Earth vessels, this is Admiral Warren," came the voice. "Over the communication system, execute containment protocol. Each ship will deploy kill switch organisms at designated coordinates. This is a one-way mission. The kill switch will destroy the Pandora organisms, but it will also consume any biological matter it encounters, including our ships." Collins looked around at his crew. They were all volunteers who had already accepted death once when they left Earth. Now they were being asked to accept it again. "You heard the Admiral," Collins announced. "Anyone who wants to use the escape pods can do so now. No shame in it. You've all done more than enough. Not a single person moved." "Guess we're all staying then," Collins said with a smile. "Let's go save the galaxy one more time." Dr. Foster had spent years studying the most dangerous organisms on Earth, but the kill switch was something entirely different. It was not a natural organism, but something created in Earth's most secret laboratories. A biological weapon designed to destroy other biological weapons. The kill switch organisms are engineered to target the specific proteins that make up the C. Pandora strain, she explained to Admiral Warren as they prepared the final deployment. They should consume the Pandora organisms completely while leaving normal biological matter alone. "Should?" Warren asked. "In theory," Dr. Foster admitted. "We've never tested it outside of laboratory conditions. We're essentially conducting the largest biological experiment in galactic history." Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker was piloting the UES Intrepid toward one of the deployment coordinates. His ship was heavily damaged from the battle with the swarm, but it was still functional. Enough to complete the mission. His crew of 15 had volunteered to stay with him until the end. "Approaching deployment zone," his navigator reported. "Pandora organisms are thick in this area. They're consuming everything they encounter." Through his view screen, Parker could see what the Pandora organisms had done to a nearby asteroid field. The rocks were covered in a strange organic growth that pulsed with its own light. The organisms were adapting to the space environment, learning to feed on mineral matter as well as biological material. "Deploy the kill switch," Parker ordered. The specially designed containers released their cargo into space. Trillions of engineered organisms spread out from the Earthship, seeking their targets. These organisms had been created for one purpose: to hunt and destroy the Pandora strain, The effect was immediate. The organic growth covering the asteroids began to wither and die as the kill switch organisms found and consumed their targets. But Parker knew that his ship was also doomed. The kill switch would eventually consume any biological matter it encountered, including the humans aboard his vessel. "How long do we have?" asked Ensign Carol Davis from the engineering station. 20 minutes, maybe 30, Parker replied. "Long enough to make sure the kill switch spreads properly." Dr. Foster watched the deployment from the Defiance laboratory. Sensors across the galaxy were reporting the same thing. The kill switch organisms were working. Pandora infections were dying wherever the engineered organisms encountered them. There was a problem. "Admiral," Dr. Foster called out with alarm, "the kill switch is adapting. It's not limiting itself to Pandora organisms anymore. It's starting to consume normal biological matter, too." Warren felt his blood run cold. "How bad?" "Bad," Dr. Foster replied. "If we don't stop it soon, the kill switch could sterilize the entire galaxy." The irony was not lost on him. They had saved the galaxy from the swarm, only to threaten it with the Pandora organisms, and now they were threatening it again with the very weapon designed to stop the Pandora strain. "Is there anything we can do?" Warren asked. Dr. Foster was quiet for a long moment. "There might be." The kill switch organisms were designed with a built-in weakness. They're programmed to die after 48 hours unless they receive a specific chemical signal. But someone needs to deploy that signal manually. "Where?" Warren asked, though he already knew the answer. "At the source," Dr. Foster replied. "Someone needs to go to the center of the kill switch deployment and release the termination signal. It's a suicide mission. The radiation from the OSO signal will kill anyone within 1,000 kilometers." Admiral Warren looked around the bridge of the Defiant. His crew had already given up their lives to save the galaxy twice. He could not ask them to do it again. "I'll go," he said quietly. "No, sir," came a voice from behind him. Dr. Foster stood at the entrance to the bridge, carrying a small containment unit. "This is my responsibility. I created these organisms. I should be the one to stop them." "Doctor, I can't let you." "You can't stop me," she interrupted. "I'm the only one who fully understands how the termination signal works. And besides, someone needs to survive to tell Earth what happened here." Before Warren could argue, Dr. Foster was heading toward the shuttle bay. She had made her decision. The shuttle carrying Dr. Foster launched from the Defiant and headed toward the center of the galaxy, where the kill switch deployment was most concentrated. She knew she would not survive the mission, but she also knew it was the only way to save trillions of lives across the galaxy. As she flew through space filled with dying organisms and the remnants of the greatest battle in galactic history, Dr. Foster thought about Earth. The planet that everyone called a death world had produced the weapons that saved the galaxy. Now it had produced the person who would save the galaxy from those weapons. "This is Dr. Foster to all Earth vessels," she broadcast as she approached the deployment zone. "The termination signal will be released in 10 minutes. All ships should move to minimum safe distance." Captain Collins received the message aboard the Ranger. "You heard her," he announced to his crew. "Time to go home." But there were no ships left to take them home. The Earth fleet had been destroyed in the battle against the swarm and the deployment of the kill switch. The few survivors were scattered across the galaxy in damaged vessels that barely functioned. They would never see Earth again, but Earth would see another sunrise because of what they had done. Dr. Foster activated the termination signal at the center of the kill switch deployment. The effect spread outward at the speed of light, reaching every kill switch organism in the galaxy. Within hours, one by one, the engineered organisms received the signal and shut down, their biological functions ceasing as their programming dictated. The galaxy was safe. 3 days later, Ambassador Zethkar stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time, the chamber was filled with representatives who looked at the human delegation with something very different from Contempt. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the human section, now the senior surviving representative of Earth. Most of the human fleet had been lost in the battle, but their sacrifice had saved trillions of lives. The Zirathi swarm has been completely eliminated, Zethkar announced to the assembly. Our sensors detect no remaining swarm activity anywhere in the galaxy. The threat has ended. A cheer went up from the assembled representatives, but it was subdued. Everyone knew the price that had been paid for victory. We owe a debt to the human species that can never be repaid, Zethkar continued. They used weapons we considered primitive to accomplish what our most advanced technology could not. They sacrificed their fleet and their people to save worlds they had never seen, people they had never met. Admiral Veltar stood up in the Centaurian section. His blue skin was pale, but his voice was strong. I owe Commander Morrison an apology. I called his people primitive. I was wrong. They are not primitive. They are what we needed them to be. Warriors from a world that taught them how to fight impossible battles.